Thank you so very much, and I will call the order of our agenda setting conference set for September the 8th at 1 o'clock. We will have the invocation by Commissioner Jimmy Keith.
Thank you.
And the pledge.
Please stand. Thank you, Lord, for giving us this time together to do the business that we so honorably chose to represent people in our community. Give us guidance and wisdom as we go about the people's business. Protect those of us who cannot protect themselves. Honor our first responders and our military personnel that are in harm's way every day. In your name we pray, amen. Amen. You want me to pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The city there would have been proud of you. You led that pledge. You led that pledge with vigor.
It's an honor to do it.
All right, we'll take us to the approval of the agenda. If I can get a motion. If I get a second. It's been moved and seconded as the approval of the agenda. Anybody have any corrections or deletions or additions? If not, all those in favor?
Unanimous. Mr. Chairman, we have to confirm the second motion. Thank you.
Yes. I'm sorry. And that will take us to the approval of the minutes that were emailed to us. Approval of the June 9th. If I can get a motion to approve in a second.
So moved. Second.
Been moved and second. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
Thank you. Just to update, Commissioner Evans will be here. He had another meeting. He's coming right after that. And Commissioner Booth was called out of state for a matter, so he will not be here with us today. So that takes us to the presentation. Madam Manager, the zoning ordinance update.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Commissioners.
Madam Manager, there's some feedback. There's a bunch of feedback over this. I thought it was me until the manager spoke. Sometimes I'm loud.
So, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I'm going to recognize Mr. Rawls Howard, our Planning and Inspections Director. This is an initiative that department has been working on, and we actually hired a consultant to help us through updating the zoning ordinance. And there's going to be a very short presentation. This is an item, an actual zoning case that will be moved forward to the full board, but we wanted to bring it here to receive any feedback or give an opportunity for the board to ask questions.
Thank you very much, Madam Manager. Good afternoon, Commissioners. I'm very happy to sit before you today to present a project that the Planning Board, along with staff, have been working on for the better part of the last year. It's an update to the sign regulations of our zoning ordinance. This was brought about in response to some changes in federal law that had happened some years back, which would then bring our code into compliance not only with federal law but also with some updated state statutes. I have Mr. Chad Meadows here, who is the principal of Code Right Planners, who's a technical advisor who's been working with staff and the planning board throughout this whole process. So we have a short presentation of about 6 slides that will just kind of hit the high points. In summary, the project was trying to focus on compliance with federal and state law. The state statutes also did change how we can handle enforcement of zoning type items. So as a part of this process, we went ahead and just wrapped in the update to our enforcement section as well too. This did go to the planning board. We went through a number of subcommittee meetings, including some meetings with some stakeholders in the community. It was a unanimous decision by the planning board, and legal has reviewed this for consistency and has found approval in it as well too. So as I said, we have about 6 slides to go through, and if you have any questions, we'll try to hit what we can, but I'll pass the baton over to Mr. Meadows here so he can do his presentation.
I got a question. Thank you, Ross.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Can you explain what state laws, what was the gist of this? You before the state and federal laws.
Yeah.
What were we doing wrong or what were we doing that was not within? And did the stakeholders include business owners and that?
So the federal law for the signs was the Reed versus the town of Gilbert, Arizona. So this happened some years back. So basically what the federal law says is that jurisdictions all across the country cannot regulate signs based off of content, meaning that if you have to be able to read the content of a sign in order to apply a certain type of regulation to it, that we can't do that anymore. So our ordinance did have those stipulations in there. So if you had, like, for example, church signs, if you had a commercial sign, if you had a real estate sign, and each one of those signs had their own specific standards, and, you know, like in regards to the size, the height, and so forth and all that, we can't do that anymore. So we had to change all of our regs in order to comply with those new federal standards. The state laws were more geared toward the enforcement part of this. So basically what the state has said is that we can no longer charge criminally in our zoning enforcement. It has to be by civil penalties, and so it has to be a civil penalty enforcement. So at the request of Mr. Moorfield, we just said, let's just wrap that in as a part of this since we're updating all of this stuff anyway. All right.
And the stakeholders?
Yeah, so we reached out to 7 or 8 of the local sign companies that do business in this county, I should say. We have a number of folks that come in from like Raleigh and like those particular areas. We didn't include them just because we really wanted to make it more focused on the people who live and do business here for this county. So we had some stakeholder meetings, a stakeholder meeting for them. We had some participation of folks that came out. We made some changes to the ordinance that Chad will go over here too, in regards to what standards and so forth were changed. But overall, it was a very positive meeting. We got a lot of really good feedback about how the ordinance looks, the inclusion of graphics, and then be able to just make the ordinance a little bit more intuitive and in order of how we apply our sign regulations and what can be predicted. If I was a sign company having to look in our code about what our standards are, it's a lot easier to read than what we had before. Yep. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Ross. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair.
Yeah.
I'm Chad Meadows. I'm Principal of Code Right Planners. My office is in Durham. And it's been my pleasure. Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Make sure we get this on record.
Okay.
It's been my pleasure to work with your staff for the last year or so on your sign and enforcement regulations. There we go. Thank you, sir. So I've been a planner for about the last 30 years, the last 19 of which have been focused primarily on code drafting for local governments across the state. And so that's a little bit about me. Let's talk about the project. As Ross mentioned, there were a couple of pieces to this ordinance change that we wanted to address. First was signs, and second was the enforcement provisions. Our objectives on the signs, I'll go over these quickly. We really wanted to increase the predictability of the standards and ease their administration. So to make the regulations easier to understand for applicants, for staff, for appointed and elected officials. Rawls talked about the changes coming out of the Supreme Court, the Reed case, bringing the county's sign regulations into alignment with the doctrine out from the court. Basically, content neutrality is the direction that every local government across the country needs to be following to avoid lawsuit and, frankly, just to make the regulations easier to follow. We improved the format. We added some graphics. We kind of shuffled the organization of Article 13 and added a lot more clarity on things like sign size, sign height, etc. We tried to synchronize your sign standards with the kind of roadways that the signs would front. The busier the road, the larger the sign could be, the taller the sign could be in recognition of traffic safety and wanting to make sure that people don't create a safety problem by trying to see a too small sign. We updated the standards for outdoor advertising, primarily to raise the bar for outdoor advertising here in the county, and to simplify and change the review process to be more legally defensible. As far as the enforcement goes, remember, these are the standards that relate to how the county processes violations or people who've done something that's contrary to the ordinance or might have done something that was contrary to the ordinance and how we investigate that. A series of changes in state law, like Rawls mentioned, the fact that a decrease of all use-related violations. That came through the General Assembly this year. It's 2021 session law. 2021 session law, so last year. So we made those changes to comply with the state requirements. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then finally, just to clarify the process. We've been at this for about a year. Project started in August of 2021. We conducted 7 meetings with your Joint Planning Board. One of those was with several representatives from the sign industry in May. They gave us a lot of great input, practical input on the standards that we had prepared at that point, whether or not our standards were workable for their clients, their models, etc. Got a lot of good feedback and made several changes with respect to what we were proposing. The Joint Planning Board considered this package of amendments on June 21st, and as Rawls mentioned, recommended approval unanimously. So, to the sign changes, the structure of Article 13. Put in some tables, changed the layout, added more imagery. We removed all of the content-based standards that we could from the provisions. Added some clarity. There's a series of signs out there that are exempt from regulation, whether that's from state law, federal law, or the county chose to exempt those kinds of signs. There's also some prohibited signs, signs you can't do anywhere in the county. More detail on sign measurement. How do we determine sign size, sign height, the setbacks, etc.? More detail on changeable copy, illumination, maintenance, all of the kinds of nuts and bolts particulars about how you administer the sign regulations and how they work in practice. We added some new rules about dilapidated, obsolete, and non-conforming signage, mostly focused on bringing that signage into conformance or removing it within a specified period of time. Some changes to outdoor advertising. We are suggesting that follow a conditional rezoning process to establish new billboards. Outdoor advertising, by the way, is a billboard. That we move away from a special use permit process towards a conditional zoning process. We've added some additional lot area standards to be more consistent with the statutes, their requirements for these kinds of uses. Added some separation provisions, 2,500 feet from one another. So if you wish to propose a new billboard in Cumberland County, it needs to be 2,500 feet from an existing billboard. And then finally, it needs to be within 660 feet of an interstate right-of-way. We updated the procedures and standards for special purpose signs. These are off-premise signs, or signs that don't look like normal signs. Maybe it's a caricature of a horse, or it's a car, or something like that. It's not a typical kind of flat panel sign, but something that's different. We've created a flexible procedure to allow county staff and your planning board to consider those kinds of applications as they come through. We've adjusted the ground sign and pole sign area and height provisions. I mentioned before, we've tried to bring into alignment the configurations for pole and ground signs with respect to the size of the roadway that they front. If you've got a narrow roadway with not a lot of traffic, then basically the ground and pole sign size and height that you have is comparable to what it is currently. Under this new regulation, if you've got a larger street, one with 4 lanes or 6 lanes, then you're allowed to have a taller sign, a larger sign face area. And again, that's done for the sake of safety, so that we don't have people slamming on their brakes to look at a sign and causing a traffic accident. So we're trying to incorporate that kind of approach with the provisions. Finally, uniform sign plans. If you've got a multiple building development, a development that has 2 or more buildings, and you intend to have signage, the uniform sign plan requirements stipulate that all of the signage needs to have a similar look and feel. They don't have to be identical in nature, but they need to be similar in nature, kind of give a character or a theme to the development. So these are the proposed sign changes. I'll quickly go over what we suggested for enforcement. This is a new article to your zoning ordinance, Article 18, and in it we have done 5 or 6 things. First, we've described all of the potential violations that could take place in the ordinance to be clear about what is or isn't a violation. We've added some more clarity about the people who are responsible for a violation. It's not always just the landowner. It might also be the tenant. It might be the tenant's agent, etc. So there are other people who can be pursued for a violation. We've provided more detail on the enforcement procedure. You know, the complaint comes in, and what does the county do after that complaint comes in? How do we, launch an investigation, and how do we notify the potential violator, et cetera, their appeal rights, all of these things. We talked about decriminalization. General Assembly basically told all local governments in the state we're no longer doing criminal penalties for most land use related violations. It's strictly a civil penalty kind of a situation. We set down or described all of the remedies that are available to the county, not because you don't know that, you do, but the applicants don't. So we wanted to make sure that they understood that there's a variety of things that the county could do if somebody violates the ordinance. There could be a stop work order or a permit revocation, a civil penalty, a court injunction, a variety of different topics or approaches the county can take. And then finally, more detail on the civil penalty process itself, just so that a potential violator understands the process. We don't want anybody to be surprised by what needs to take place and what the expectation is with respect to how they solve that violation. So we wanted to enumerate that there in the civil penalty section. And that's essentially the changes. I'm happy to answer your questions.
Did you have a definition section? I was reading through this, on page 20, it talked about the mansard roof and all of that. And if I'm a homeowner and, it talks about the Gabriel style and all this, is there some kind of definition on some of the things that's in here that a person would understand?
That a layperson might actually understand.
Right, yeah.
Hopefully, we hope so. Certainly, we spent time trying to put in, I think we put in 30 or 40 new sign definitions in the definitions chapter of your zoning ordinance. So we did attempt to do that. Further, if you go into Article 13,
right,
there are 13, 14 different generic sign types that we set down, and those are defined in detail in each of the summary tables.
With photo examples.
Okay.
With photo examples. So it really was our intent to not play guessing games. We want to be very clear and again, make things more predictable and easier for everybody to understand.
Then as we go on, this was just I just needed to know this, on page 25, where you have the obscene matter. Who does that go to? Who makes that? I know legal wrote it, because I can, that is written, because it takes basically the free speech and all of that stuff. But then it gets down to, as you do that, it's, who makes that decision? Does it start at
That's a great
at the
question.
planning board, the zoning, or does it come to the commissioners? Because that was...
So in North Carolina, your planning director is the review authority responsible for interpreting your zoning ordinance. So they're the one who make that initial interpretation. Now, an applicant has a choice. They can either agree with that interpretation or disagree. If they disagree, then they would bring that as an appeal to your Board of Adjustment.
Okay. To the Board of Adjustments, not here.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Just wanted to make sure.
And absolutely, yes, we had the attorney involved in the
I can
obscene
tell
matter.
that's who wrote that. Commissioner Keith, did you have a...
Yes. I know you're taking a very general look at this and not getting down to specifics, but I'm curious, has this been a problem other than the state and federal guidelines that are being used? And which ones in the new article, or specifically, what is a more, are we asking for any more restrictive sign ordinances than is currently in place?
That's a great question.
Which ones are more restrictive?
So what are the big changes, and are we asking for more? So I'll point to a couple instances where the Joint Planning Board did articulate concerns with the current standards. The first of those is the outdoor advertising, the billboard signs. In times gone by, there were rezoning cases to allow these kinds of signs to locate on postage, and forgive my use of on postage stamp sized lots that were no good for anything but a billboard. That's actually a violation of the law. Chapter 143 in the general statutes is very clear about what the DOT is or is not going to approve with respect to a lot size for a billboard. And so that was one area that your planning board identified for us as a real problem, that they were uncomfortable with the zoning requests that they were getting and the configuration of the lots for these kinds of signs, and asked us if we could make some changes. So we spent a lot of time looking not just at the statutes, but at what other counties are doing around you. And that's how we came up with the approach that we came up with, which is essentially, you've got to be within 660 feet of the interstate. You should be doing a conditional rezoning, and that lot should be of a comparable size to accommodate any allowable use in the district that's requested, instead of these little tiny postage stamp size lots.
Can I follow up on that?
Please.
Because, so according to this, by changing from special use to conditional use, that, and a lot of times these signs go up in rural areas, right? Because, so it doesn't matter if a piece of property is zoned, what we'll call A1, I don't know if you're familiar with ours, where, very rural in nature. And they have a conditional use for that, but is that conditional use just for the area of that sign, or is it for the complete tract? And so are you parceling out to do exactly what you just said, which was kind of in violation of the state law?
Right, so anybody who's got an existing conditional use permit to do this is allowed to continue to do it. They're grandfathered under the ordinance. Going forward, can you do it? No. And in fact, the zoning has to be commercial or industrial in nature. DOT should not be approving billboards on land that doesn't have a non-residential zoning district designation. Okay, so that's according to the NCDOT. So if that's happened in the past, then, I don't know all of the particulars of those cases, but certainly DOT's rules and the statutes are clear about that. So if you've got an existing use permit that's out there, you're unaffected. Going forward, there won't be any conditional use or special use permits because we've switched to the conditional zoning situation. And so I don't know if I'm answering your question.
Yeah, I think I can probably clarify. So like the process that we currently go through, Commissioner, is that if you want to go through and put a billboard up, it's usually a two-step process. Typically, you'd have to go through a rezoning process in order to be able to get the property zoned. And then you might have to get to subdivide the land out in order to be able to do what you're doing to begin with. And you got to get it rezoned. And then after you get it rezoned, then you got to go through a special use permit process, which is through our Board of Adjustment. So it's a three-step process to do that. So what this does is this collapses it into one type of review process for conditional zoning. We added standards that basically say that if you're going to subdivide a lot out and you got commercial zoning, that lot has to be created in such a way that if that billboard goes away, that you can fit a legitimate business on there for access reasons and for other types of uses, that we're just not carving out a small little lot on a dirt road somewhere and then zoning it commercial, because then that has the potential to open up, some spot zoning concerns and things like that. So I think a lot of those concerns we address by simplifying this and consolidating a lot of our processes down for review for that.
The outdoor advertising had a really good lobbying group for a lot of years. Right?
Indeed, still do.
Yeah.
Still do. Great question.
And just for, everybody's, because we're talking about this is in the county. So the city of Fayetteville and all the municipalities have their own sign. I just want to make sure, because people are listening in and they may think it applies to the whole entire county. It's just the unincorporated areas of Cumberland County. I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood that.
Yes, sir.
Anybody else have any questions or comments? All right. If not, I would take a motion to move this to a public hearing on the proposed text amendment as presented and place on the September 9th regular meeting agenda.
September 19th.
September 19th, I'm sorry, September 19th. What did I say? September 9th. September 19th regular meeting.
Does that give us enough time for the public hearing?
The public hearing is
It
that
will be
night.
on the 19th.
It's on the 19th.
But to advertise,
We have already advertised for that.
where are you advertising?
We do the ads as far as, it's being treated as like a zoning case, because if you notice in the heading, it's like a case, whatever, ZON 043, I believe is what it is. So we advertise in the Fayetteville Observer, I believe is the paper we drop our legal ads to.
That's,
Can we put it on the website?
I believe we also do that as well, as part of that, but we can do that as well.
in a zoning case, so you get most of your attention from the sign that's outside the zone. You don't have
Even though it's small.
Yeah.
Right.
I just, nothing against the Fayetteville Observer, but I think you might as well yell it to the wind on that, so.
We can do that
And
too.
if you could do, Brian, if you can do a press release to all of our sunshine list, that'll help too. That there's a public hearing on the.
Yes, sir.
They have a motion Moved by Commissioner Council, seconded by Commissioner Lancaster. All those in favor?
Unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That'll take us to the competitive grant update.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, as you know, we have been aggressively seeking grant opportunities. Normally, we provide this as an update, but there's been some significant movement in this area, and we thought we would take just a few moments to share a few details about our grant opportunities.
Good afternoon. Your packet contains a spreadsheet with a grant updated report. I'm going to hit some highlights in the area of notifications, recent submissions, upcoming applications, and a capacity building partnership. Since the last grants update in May, county departments have been notified of awards totaling more than $613,000. Among the notifications, the county's congressionally directed spending request for $2.4 million for Sheriff's Office radio upgrades is still alive. It's in the Senate Appropriations Bill. It was released in July, and so we're awaiting budget approval. In August, Governor Cooper announced that Connect Holdings was awarded $3.2 million great grant. Our ARP committee and the Board of Commissioners has allocated $1 million in ARP funding as a match for that, and the required match based on the grant from the state is $567,000. Our Internal Services Department's been awarded a VW settlement grant for 2 electric vehicle charging ports here at the Judge E. Maurice Braswell Courthouse, and that's for up to $10,000. Animal Services received a grant from Pet Finder Foundation for $2,500 to help with waive adoption fees. And in the recent state budget bill, the county was awarded a $100,000 grant, and that is for the town of Linden for capital and equipment. So we'll be working with the town to coordinate that. Our library has received several grants. The largest one so far is $135,000 from the state to purchase technology and multi-sensory elements to create teen spaces. That's to expand access to services. And the most recent was a $10,000 grant from the state to create a story walk similar to the one at Clark Park that was installed a few years ago. And this will be at the Hope Mills Park, which is adjacent to the Hope Mills Branch Library. Emergency Services received about $78,000 from the North Carolina Department of Agriculture to clear storm debris from a canal in the Linden area. The department also received $63,000 from the Department of Public Safety to identify engineered flood mitigation activities in the town of Spring Lake and the Manchester area. $10,000 from the North Carolina Department of Public Safety for hazardous materials commodity and flow study to look at hazardous materials along the interstate and by rail, that's transported by rail. And then $100,000 from Public Safety for a weather station for the new 911 call center. Okay, I apologize for that.
That 1,000 didn't seem like a whole lot.
It is $1,000.
Oh, I thought you said 100,000.
I'm sorry, $1,000.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
I stand corrected.
I just wanted to notify y'all.
Thank you.
Okay, and Soil and Water Conservation, they received $279,000 for a stream flow rehabilitation assistance program, and they're also managing $2.1 million in grant funding for debris removal at 32 various sites across the county. Now, our North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality awarded solid waste a loan. We were notified that it's a loan and not a grant for a retention pond project improvements at the landfill. That was for $1.7 million, but solid waste plans to resubmit in the fall cycle for a grant for that. So that project, we're still trying to get grant funding.
Solid Waste has recently submitted for $315,000 of VW 6 clean diesel trucks. And our Engineering and Infrastructure Department submitted a grant to the Department of Defense Community Infrastructure program for 7 generators, emergency generators to be installed at facilities across the county, our emergency shelters. So we have some upcoming deadlines. I've mentioned one that Solid Waste is working on September 30th to resubmit grants. They are also going to submit a planning grant for the Vander Water and Sewer District. The Norcrest application that was submitted last fall, we're going to resubmit that. And Cumberland County is one of 19 counties that's eligible to apply for up to $50,000 through the Prevent Prescription Drug Overdose-Related Death grant program from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services. That is an October 10th deadline. And then there is the Building Infrastructure and Communities BRIC grant program. There was a webinar this morning. The deadline for the letter of interest is October 3rd. So we're working on identifying a project for that. So this is an area, it's not a grant in dollar amounts, but we do have a partnership with the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, and that's they are providing to the county a strategic project coordinator. His name is Noah Johnson. He's working with our ARP program and our ARP staff, so Ty Bald and team were very excited to have Noah here. So I did want you to make aware that the association is paying the salary, the fringe benefits, travel, and training for that. And he's been working 3 days a week with the county. So that's the update.
Anybody have any questions or comments? If not, we will take that as information. Thank you. That will take us to the proposed Ncaa state legislative goals.
Yes, sir. Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask Ms. Shutt to review this item and provide some background.
Every 2 years in the months preceding the long session, the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners conducts a process to set their legislative goals. The deadline is September 12th for counties all across the state to submit proposed goals. These will be sent to the individual steering committees, and then they will make recommendations to go to the Legislative Goals Conference, which has been set for November in Wake County. Your packet contains a slate of proposed goals submitted by county department heads for your consideration in forwarding to Ncaa a letter from the chairman. Our Amanda Botter, our Solid Waste Management Director, submitted 3 goals in the area of the environment. One is related to scrap tires, and that's to increase the percentage of funding counties receive from the scrap tire disposal tax. Currently, 30% of those proceeds go to the general fund. For electronics, support additional funding to assist local governments in managing electronics recycling. And in PFAS, to support clean water and regulation of companies that have manufactured PFAS chemicals. In the area of health and human services, our health director, Dr. Jennifer Green, submitted a couple of goals. One, to support proposed changes to the education requirements to qualify as a registered environmental health specialist in North Carolina. These proposed changes were included in a bill in the short session, but it did not move forward. What this proposed change would do, it would make the educational requirements and the practice requirements less restrictive. It would therefore immediately expand the pool of qualified applicants for environmental health positions, which could help with the on-site wastewater permit backlogs that some counties are experiencing. The second goal is to restore the Women's and Children's Health Block grant funding to local health departments. Since 2011, there have been carve-outs that started at 10%, and now they total almost 40%. This redirection of funds has resulted in a reduction in local health departments, the services that they provide to maternal health, child health, and women's health services. Cumberland County, Dr. Green points out, has higher rates of teen births, infant mortality, and low birth rate than the state average. And then the third request from the Health Department is to secure recurring appropriations to address increased demands on local health departments associated with communicable and emerging infectious diseases. And then the final set of goals were submitted by our Social Services Director, Heather Skeens. The first one is to increase state-supported funding for adult services, work, and reimbursement for the salaries. Our population is aging, and currently the contribution to providing services to adults is a primarily county-funded. Caseloads are increasing in this area. And so based on these increasing needs, DSS is seeking additional state funding to be able to provide those services. The second goal is to support funding of the 13 strategies that were included in Transforming the Child Welfare and Family Wellbeing Together, which is a coordinated action plan for better outcomes. Those were included in your agenda packet, and that plan was released by NCDHHS and was developed by a multi-sector team. And then the third goal, to support continued state funding of Medicaid and support efforts to close coverage gaps. Ms. Skeen is recommending and asking that there be a 6-month startup window prior to Medicaid expansion, if that's approved, to allow departments of social services to prepare for the expansion. And those were the slate of goals before you for your consideration.
Does anybody have any questions, comments? I do. Since y'all don't have. We don't have anything on here in terms of mental health. And we've got to talk about mental health and send it to the state. We've got to have some crisis centers across this state for children and adults. We're sending children all out of this state. All of our PTRFs have almost closed down, and we have nothing in here as to that. We've got to talk about mental health. We do have the mobile crisis unit that we have, and we got some other things that are going on with the hospital. But if we don't deal with something in terms of asking them as a goal on mental health, we have let down the citizens of this community. The other thing I believe we got to talk about is daycare. We need to, from the state association, folks not going back to work because there's a lack of daycare. And either the state's going to have to step up in terms of how they do it or some funding, but we've got to do something. There has to be some issue as to address as to daycare in that, and I think that goes up under Health and Human Services. The last thing that I have kind of pushed for a long time, which may not go anywhere, but I think it's going to happen all over the state, especially now that they're doing, okay, on I-95, you see all the constructions. Every time they have an accident out there, it's horrific. And our volunteer fire department goes out there. They're the first ones on the scene. Everybody that goes out there gets paid. The ambulance, the highway patrol, and these volunteer fire departments get no reimbursement for their funds. If you're talking about gas, you're talking about pulling them away, doing all that, their time and all that. There has to be all up and down, and it's just not, you got 85, 95, 77. All of these volunteer fire departments, they're on a shoestring budget as it is, and if we don't address that and ask for something from the state to be able to do that, I don't think we've done our volunteer fire department. I'm going to just tell you, I don't even know how the Wade, the Falcon, and all of those are even making it. I think we may even have to think about what we do for them because of, every day there's an accident on 95. And part of it is those barriers coming down and all of that. So I think we've got to address some of those things. So I think we just got to go back and look at our mental health stuff and talk about what they're doing and the cuts that they're making to the LME. And I would tell you with this Medicaid transformation, we were at the hospital the other night. The Medicaid transformation is just going to be, it's just going to change the whole landscape. And if we're not prepared for that in terms of having some kind of discussion, we're going to be behind the 8 ball on that. So, Madam Manager, I'm sorry. And I should have sent that in because Sally sent it to us early, and I missed it. So I just think we need to go back, and I can help you do some of that after that, so.
Yes, sir, we can certainly work on that, and Mrs. Evans, as you know, is a board member on the Alliance, and we'll include her in that discussion and get with county legal to help us
Yeah.
work on a goal to add.
Thank you, but I should have said that earlier, because that was one of the things, because I think what we did was, we got Health and Human Services, we got the library and all of those, but because, I guess we should have got together, Vicky, beforehand, that's our fault, right? Commissioner Keith.
If you don't mind, I'm gonna ride on your coattails a little bit on that. The mental health issue, it's getting more expensive. We're not getting it, but mental health is affecting every single part of our community. It's not only people getting services, it's in the jail, it's the people that are homeless, it's the people, it is such a multiplier when you don't work with mental health. To your point about, thank you for bringing up the volunteer fire departments, most of those are low-well fire departments that are in a rural nature. When you have an accident on 995, it's usually not a fender bender. And it takes a lot of time. I think there was one time they were out there for almost 24 hours on a big accident that they had out there. And when we only let our department heads come in on some of these things, sometimes we might miss them. I was very curious, and I'll talk about globally at the state level. Did they talk about the lottery funds at all anymore? Because that has always been a sore spot. It was really hot for a long time. The counties have really taken the burden when they changed up the lottery. Is there any discussion
They
about
do.
that and the relationship between counties and schools?
They have the different categories of goals. Education is one, and the lottery funding and capital needs funding is one of those goals. Environment, agriculture, education, finance, and governmental are among those different steering committees that are established. So.
Are they talking about a lottery? Did they make the goal list for the education or the?
Well, they're developing the goals now. It is in the past been on there.
Commissioner Stewart will be, they haven't even had the list. This is what we send up, but they've already got a whole slate of things on that. And our Vice Chairwoman Stewart's going to be there for the legislative goal sessions on our behalf and on the behalf of Cumberland County. So, but there's a whole laundry list.
And
This is
public-
just the ones that we set up in addition to all the lists that they already have.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, that takes us to the consideration of agenda items. Madam Manager, the first one is the North Carolina Civil War and Reconstruction.
Yes, sir. As you may recall, back in June, I believe, Mr. Healy was here, who is the chair of the Board of Directors of the North Carolina Civil War and Reconstruction History Center, provided a presentation, and Mr. Healy come forward. And in your package, you'll find a request, and what they're seeking today is some confirmation of the county's commitment of the $7.5 million to move the project forward.
And we've heard the presentation, so we don't have to hear it again. Thank you, Mr. Healy. Unless somebody wants to hear it. We heard that presentation at the last. It's, for us, is the consideration of the request. In our packet was the letter that came August 2nd, 2022. With that, and Commissioner Council, do you have a motion?
I'm sorry.
Well, I think we had an update from the attorney, I'm sorry.
Mr. Chair, I realize that this has been ongoing for some while, but it has to come to the board very often. And I've never seen a state-funded project where there was participation by local government, where there was not some agreement between, we had to sign with the state. Have we gotten any indication of something like that?
I haven't.
This is the first time it's come up, sir.
It would be highly unusual for and you say, you folks say you are, it's not a state project.
I'm sorry?
Not a state project.
So I guess the question I would ask to the attorney, which is what we hear every single day, I guess, is that in order for a county to give funds, there has to be some service or, so if you can enlighten us. we hear it on every last one of the ones that we hear.
We can't give,
You can pull your microphone down,
we
Rick.
can't give funds to anyone. What we'd have to do in this instance is have a contract with the, your official entity is the North Carolina Civil War and Reconstruction History Center?
Foundation, yes.
Foundation, okay. And you are a
501c.
corporation?
501c.
Corporation, okay.
That's the organization that the state has granted the $60 million to.
And you don't have any agreement, any kind of written agreement with the state?
We have a funding agreement absolutely with the state.
Okay.
Well, excuse me, if you're gonna talk, you have to come to the
Yeah.
microphone. I can't have you, let me tell you this much. I can't have people just yelling out in my meeting, okay? I don't have a problem with you coming up, and if you wanna add on with Mr. Healy, come right up to the mic. That's fine. But we can't just have you yelling out, so if he needs to come up, that's fine.
Mr. Healy, I understand you said there is an agreement. If could, Mr. Chair and Commissioners, I would suggest that we at least let them get that and take a look at it and see what we're making a commitment for.
Or at least make it contingent upon that. You can do it that way. Commissioner Evans.
Thank you. I'm sorry, I'm walking in on the tail end of it.
No, we just started.
But the last time Mr. Healy was here, I asked him if there was an agreement with the state regarding this, because my concern was, we're saying that the state would take over this, this project as far as taking care of it, the upkeep of it, and the managing of it, and all of this. And my question was at that time, did we have a memorandum of agreement with the state regarding that? And Mr. Healy at that time told me yes. And so is that the agreement that you're speaking of, sir?
Yeah, I didn't know about it. Yes, sir.
Okay,
If there's an
okay.
agreement, yes, sir.
All right, we'll get that
Well,
to
do
you.
we have we seen it?
I have not.
Okay.
So I would, if it's the pleasure of this board to go forward, would make it contingent upon legal having that document and that document being done, and it be contingent on what the city does.
And we will have to do an agreement with them. We can't just give them, there will have to be an agreement made.
You gotta have, again, we always talk about there has to be some services or whatever that's been done. And Madam Manager, I'll go to this point. These funds were appropriate because it's in our CIP budget, so it's not like it's off budget, it's in the CIP budget.
It's in the capital investment fund.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
so it's already there.
Yes, sir.
Had been put aside, so it's not anything outside of the budgets. Because we try not to do anything out of budget season, because it just makes it difficult to do a budget, to have a budget and then go from that. So, I think Commissioner Council, with that in mind, I guess, in terms of what, the county attorney, just mentioned would be, a motion to approve the 7.5 million contingent upon the city doing their funding and the document that the legal needs. It's been moved and second. Anybody have any comments? Commissioner Evans.
My comment is, I don't like the fact that we're doing it contingent on the city. I think that if we have our own minds, and thoughts and ideas about this. I'm going to tell you that even though I supported it the first time, I'm not supporting it this time, and I'm going to tell you why. Because I think it's only fair to let you know why. And it's nothing personal, but we are going through a difficult time in this country. We're going through a difficult time, and even here, dealing with the way that things are being handled with our local government as far as the city is concerned, wanting to change the structure of the city, I just think that the timing is wrong. And I'm not saying this just because of me, but I have had the opportunity to talk to a couple of residents, even some former commissioners, who agree that the time is just not right for this. And if you're not understanding what I'm talking about regarding what the city is doing now, I have no problem explaining to you. Because the structure of changing the structure of the way the council is done, it almost looks different. It looks different. It looks different in a way is that you're changing the structure of something where everybody have the capabilities of voting and selecting who they want instead of trying to tell or trying to add on more to make a difference. Okay, that's the city. But I do not think that the timing is right for a Civil War museum here in the city of Fayetteville. We don't have anything that's showing any unity here in the city or the county between the races. We don't have that. And then to bring in a Civil War museum that has caused problems in other areas, I don't think this is the right time. Actually, I don't think it's the right place. So I will be voting against it.
All right. Anybody else have any, he gonna vote against it. Anybody else have any questions or, no? No, we got a motion on the floor, and I'm doing a motion on the floor. All those in favor?
Let me be clear. I just want to be clear. So this vote isn't contingent to the document being produced and legal going over it and contingent upon the city,
The city appropriating the 7.52.
which is what the original,
Right,
going back to what was done originally before I got on board.
that's correct. Well, it was a number of other things, but those that passed by, there were a number of other things that were on there, but those are the two main ones. All right. All those in favor?
Voting in favor, Commissioners Lancaster, Council, Stewart, Adams, and Keith. Voting in opposition, Commissioner Evans.
Commissioner, Chairman Adams, may I make one point of clarification? And so the $7.5 million has been included in our capital planning model for many
Yes.
years. It is not budgeted in the current year expenditure
Right,
of
but
the
it's in the-
CIF.
Right,
Yes,
not
sir, I
in the
just wanna
CIF,
be
but it's in
clear.
the, it's been set aside.
Yes, sir.
It's already been set aside.
Thank you for letting me clarify that.
Yes, thank you.
And there's nothing in our motion that is going to delay it. We've been talking about it for what, 14 years?
Right there, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, 14 years, so, okay.
All right. Thank you, thanks, Matt. Commissioner Evans.
Yeah, and you know, and Commissioner Council, I really appreciate you bringing that up, the fact that you've been talking about it for 14 years. There are a number of things that we've been talking about for a period of time that has been for the benefit of this community as a whole, and we have not acted on it as quickly as we have acted on this. And exactly. And I think that, and one thing that I'm talking about is the homeless shelter. It's been talked about throughout this community for years. And even here on this board, I know it's been talked about since I've been on here, and I've been on here 12, 14 years. No, 12 years. 12 years. I've been on here 12 years. And we've been talking about it. And see, and that's what bothers me, is because I don't have a problem with the Civil War Museum. What I have a problem is with the Civil War Museum is the separation that is causing of people in our community. And if we were out there listening to individuals, we would see the problem. We have a problem with homelessness, and we can't address that. But you want to bring something to our community that is so divisive, and you know it's divisive. And we want to do that, and we want to give $7.3 million, which we've already allocated the funds, which is, okay, I can't complain about that because we've already set aside for it, so it's theirs. But we want to give $7.3 million away to a Civil War museum that's very divisive in this community, not only with black folks, but white folks as well. And it burns me up, but you don't want to help those. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I'm going to calm down. But we don't want to help those that are less fortunate, that don't have nowhere to stay, that's looking for help, and we just don't want to do this. And we're a Health and Human Services Board. We're not in the museum business. It just doesn't make sense.
Commissioner Evans, and not in opposition to what you said, but I will take offense at the fact that I think in the last year we moved the shelter a whole lot further along than it's ever been. I think it was a long time in coming, but I think you do, it's a disservice to this board to say we're not working on this shelter. Commissioner Stewart has worked this last year, a year and a half, 2 years, has worked tremendously to be able to do this. I think we are real close to having this done. There's some other things you'll see on the agenda later on that we'll do with that. So besides all the other stuff you said, the shelter part, I can't let you just say that we're not doing, that this board's not doing that, because they are. Now, you've been on here 12 years? I ain't gonna go there. I'm gonna leave it alone.
No, you go there. You go
I'm
there.
gonna leave it alone, but anyway.
But the point that I'm trying to make, Mr. Chairman, is that
I just
it's been, and yes, I've been there 12 years and been talking about it year after year after year. And here it is now, 2022, and we're just talking about it.
No, you're not just talking about, you talk about it every year.
But I'm talking about doing something,
Oh,
doing something.
so you didn't do nothing for the last 12 years?
I couldn't do nothing because everybody blocked me.
Ooh, all right, thank you. That will take us to the next item of business, which is the T.J. Robson Life Center. And I think that Commissioner Keith and Commissioner Evans asked this for this, so if y'all have any comments?
Ms. Robinson's been with us a number of times, and it seems like there is some
No. For 10 or 12.
But I think, Jimmy, as you told, I think that the county attorney needs some documents or anything else even before.
What
And
is
Rick, if you can update us. I'm
I
sorry.
want to acknowledge that the way that they're structured is not that, but do I believe that they do a good thing in the community? Absolutely. And when Ms. Robinson came up and briefed us again about the amazing work that they're doing over there, I thought it was very similar to something we did earlier with the YMCA, but I didn't know what the legal ramifications were on that.
I'm not sure that we did with the YMCA. I understood that it was, we were talking about hope meals with that one. But that's certainly what this is all about. As I've said many times, we can't give money to anyone, including nonprofits. This, way this is set up to be for an expenditure of 10 years, it would be my recommendation that it be set up as an outside agency, and through the outside agency contract like we already do for existing nonprofits. And then everybody be treated the same in terms of the requirements for the contract and the documentation they've got to provide for the spending. So that would be my recommendation if you do this.
Commissioner Evans.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, as always. Mr. Attorney, the requirements that we have set up always for other nonprofits that you want to classify as,
We call them outside agency contracts because they have to be doing something that you have the authority to do yourselves as a
Okay.
county.
so what are some of the requirements that we expect of entities like that?
A contract that details what services they're going to provide to the community, documentation to make sure that they are not in danger of being administratively suspended by the Secretary of State and are current with all their tax documents and that sort of stuff.
Okay.
We do that for Falcon Children's Home, Vision Resource Center, I mean, all the agencies that you see in your budget every year go through that.
Okay. And one reason why I had asked, and thank you, Commissioner Keith, one reason that I asked that they come before us again, because I don't think that we all clearly understand or understood what it is that they're asking for. I know that they're asking for financial help, but what I would like for the young lady that wasn't get,
Well, what I would, and I'm not gonna cut you off, I don't want to put her at a disadvantage because if she doesn't know those legal ramifications, so I would ask that she get with legal so he can tell her exactly what needs to do and then bring that back to be able to do that. Because if she doesn't know what he's talking about or how to do that, then that puts her at a disadvantage. I don't want anybody at a disadvantage. So if we get with legal beforehand and then bring it back, it's a much better in terms of trying to move it to get those funds.
well, what I was going to suggest, Mr. Chair, is that we ask her once again what it is that she's wanting, so we will have clarity on what it is that she would like for the county to try to assist with, now unless you already know it.
Yes, sir. I actually had first asked to meet with her, and then she put her request in an email to me. It's included in the packet, and she's seeking funding in the amount of $5,500 per month for 120 months.
For what purpose? Did she indicated that?
Yes, it is to fund, and I believe it's in the email.
Madam Manager, the four things she has listed there, we would develop that into a scope of work with the
Right.
contract. We do that for all the nonprofits.
It's
So
midnight.
It would be detailed.
Midnight basketball, special needs sports program, showers for homeless students, and a juvenile diversion program.
Okay, and, Mr. I'm through at this.
No, you're not, but go ahead. No, you're not, but go ahead.
Mr. Attorney, Rick, what was it that you just said?
We would put this into the format that we use for all the nonprofits in terms of the scope of work attachment to the contract, and we would help her put that down.
Okay, did I not hear you say, and that's why I asked you to say it again, did you allude to the fact that this possibly falls under that scope?
It would need a little more information, but we'll make it work.
And this one would be a little bit different because our current outside agency contracts are contracts for 1 year only. They're subject to appropriation and the budget process.
Okay.
And I think we have to be clear, this won't be the ARP funds because that process is already run, and it was a application process. So this would actually have to come out of general funds and out of the budget. So it would be a budgetary thing. Commissioner Key.
I'm glad you brought that up, Ms. Cannon, because, I'm supportive of the project, but I'm not so sure I'm comfortable with a 10-year without some sort of oversight to ensure that the program is working like they had hoped. And I imagine this would be an annual type of payout. So, instead of committing to a 10, maybe a 5 and a 5 or.
And I think, as we talked about in the ARP committee, which we're bringing back, is units when we talked about the units in terms of the way JCPC does it, in terms of being able to disperse those funds. Because that's also another, if they're a 501c3, and you're talking about and we've already got the juvenile diversion program, but that would fall up under that juvenile crime prevention council, and it's 1.3 million that they could ask for some money out of the juvenile crime prevention committee too, as a 501c3. They have some possibly at the end of this year, as some comes back, and then clearly 1.3 million that they do in March also.
Well, and see, and Mr. Chairman, sorry.
You won't finish.
And the reason that I brought this up was because certainty. We need to know, or they need to know, what it is if we're going to really attempt to help them.
I think the consensus was around the table to do that, but to get with legal to be able to make sure that we're doing it in a legal way. But I think that was kind of the consensus around the table. Is that right? Okay.
Fantastic.
All right. Thank you so very much. So, Rick, I know you're in the middle of trying to get something out by 4 o'clock, and so it might take a little while, not today, but if you could get some appointment with Ms. Robinson, and we can kind of figure that out. And if you would include the manager, because again, it is a budgetary item that has to be done. So, but I think the consensus around the table is to try to do something. All right.
If Ms. Robson, if you'll just contact our folks in the office, we can set that up right away. I mean, not
Yeah.
today, but pretty soon.
Well, Rick, if you can wait one more moment, because I think this update to the joint planning board, that's the next item.
Let me say this. Attorney Moorfield, if you could please make sure that everything that she will need from A to Z, that she's provided with all that information, because oftentimes there's a pattern of coming back and then send back, then coming back and send back. Make sure she has everything that she needs, and that's that clarity that Commissioner Evans was talking about, so that she has everything, so she doesn't have to keep coming up here, especially if there's a consensus to go ahead and fund this and put it in the budget in some kind of way. Thank you.
That takes us up to the update of the Cumberland County Joint Planning Board.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to ask Ross Howard to come forward to share with us the changes that the planning board approved to the bylaws.
Thank you very much. Yes, so
Thank you all for coming.
as a part of the ongoing efforts to update and improve operations for the planning board, one of the things that we were working on for the last few months is just updating our bylaws. So for those who don't know, the bylaws are simply the rules of procedure by which the board would use for their internal operations when, how do you frame your agenda, how do you make decisions, and so forth and so on. So the last time the bylaws were comprehensively updated was about 2009. So we went through this effort in conjunction with the county attorney's office to basically, what started it all.
Can I ask one question? Because I know Rick has to go. I just have
Yes.
one question I needed for Rick.
Yeah.
And then he can go. He has to get something done by 4 o'clock.
Yes, sir.
So he has to get filed with the court system. My one question is on membership, and it has to do with Hope Mills, is that I thought Hope Mills was pulling out and going and doing their own zoning stuff. So if that's the question, then just like the city of Fayetteville was not on here, why would Hope Mills have a member on this board?
So the request that came from Hope Mills was that their day-to-day sort of plan reviews or subdivision reviews, we had historically been doing the day-to-day operations of their planning department. They have pulled those types of operations into their own house.
Which is what the city does?
That's what the city does, yeah, but we have broached the subject about their type of relationship on the planning board, and they are understanding that at some point they would have a request to potentially come off the planning board.
I'm sorry.
They're fully aware of the fact that, of what you're bringing up about they sit on the planning board. But we had talked about the idea of them potentially coming off, and we're waiting on a request for them to do so.
But I don't think they're looking to come up. Because they contacted me, they want us to do certain things, and then they're gonna get off. Because they asked that their, what do we call those things, that, the land use plan. I
Yes.
think they're like number 4 or number 5. So they've asked to move up to 1 or 2. I think after we do all that and spend all that energy, they'll move on. Is there any kind, I'm just trying to be fair to all these other municipalities.
Right. Yes, sir.
There's no money that they pay us to be on this, right?
They pay I think it's a per capita fee, if I'm not mistaken, right, Vicki? Yeah, just like any other town does.
So they will continue to pay the per capita fee on this?
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, and so,
Thank you. I didn't.
when we redid this, primarily the concern from some of the board members is how do we handle when we have some concerns about attendance, when we don't have board members that really show up on time, but what's the process that we go through with that to make a recommendation? So I did staff did some research onto some comparable bylaws from other county, like planning boards, and we inserted the language about attendance. But then, we took the opportunity to update the bylaws in reference to the changed interlocal agreement from 2018. There were a number of things in here that related to general administration, some financial concerns that were just basically holdovers of the previous arrangement prior to 2018. So we made those types of changes in here as well too. So really that's about it. But other than that, and the attendance, that's what we looked at with this update. So we just looked at it, try to frame it specifically through the lens of the current interlocal agreement that we have with the towns. So per the interlocal agreement, all the towns have to go forth and ratify the draft. I will tell you as part of the clean copy, I think it's attached to your agenda packet, is that we have the signed sheets from all of the towns. Right now, the county is the final step before we can ratify the full bylaws. So all of the governing boards of the towns have signed off on this draft.
Does anyone have any questions or comments?
I have a comment, Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead.
In the last 18 months, it seems like there has been quite a division between the goals of the board and the goals of the staff. And particularly in some areas that a number of board members may be very familiar with, may go against the land use plan, may go against, and then it has to come to us commissioners to decide. There has been an increase in that, correct? Have you seen it? Have you noticed an increase in staff and board being on opposite ends of a decision?
I would say not 100%, no. I would say, I think it's kind of case specific.
Well, we don't even have uncontested anymore.
I think that was something that I think the county
Because
attorney had
everything
pushed.
became contested because of the breakdown of how many people voted for it, whether it was unanimous or not, what the staff
Right.
believed. And I'm just concerned that the planning board, I'm not trying to restructure it, but if you have, regardless of what the strategic plan or the land use plan or that is, you have subjectivity with board members who have bias sometimes, and it's pretty evident when it comes through, you know, not in my town, regardless of what the land use plan may or may not say. And sometimes commissioners are guilty of that too. But it does put us in an awkward position, because we've had a couple that have come forward lately that were very contentious between residents and others. But I guess my comment would be, is there anything that we can do as we're going through this process of the bylaws? Who has authority to structure the planning board? Is it the commission?
You have the structure to appoint the, I believe, 4 members in the unincorporated areas, and then the governing bodies have the authority to appoint from their respective jurisdictions. Falcon, Godwin, and Wade have 1 representative, Linden has 1, and everybody else has 1 representative as well.
But then Grace Creek, which is really bigger than a lot of the Grace Creek area, is bigger than all this, really doesn't have any representation unless you put it like an at-large person.
Well, it'd be someone like, I'm assuming, it could be 1 or all 4 of your unincorporated appointments could be from any area you feel is necessary for the county.
I understood that, but we're a little bit unique, and sometimes our towns are smaller than our areas. You know, Vander doesn't have a mayor, right? There's
Right.
a lot of action happening out in Vander with development and things.
Yes, sir.
But they don't necessarily have a representative. And Ross, I don't know the answer, but I have personally just seen what I believe is a disconnect or an air pocket sometimes in discussions between the board and the staff. If you don't see it, then it's okay. It seems to me that there's more conflict now than there's been before. That's-
All right. Anybody have any other questions, comments? I had a couple. One, I guess, kind of goes along with Commissioner Keith. It really, because it does just bother me, but it's just, could be just me, that a town is on here and they appoint somebody that doesn't live in their town. Is that addressed in here? Because Linden's person doesn't live in Linden.
Yeah, and I think that's something that I think we've talked internally. I think that would be addressed more through the interlocal agreement or some change to an interlocal agreement versus maybe the bylaws. So, I mean, that would be my opinion. If the board wanted to readdress the interlocal agreements, that I think that's where that would be housed.
Well, I guess is where it comes from in terms of residency. In terms of, if we're telling you got a representative from the town of Linden and they live over in West Fayetteville, that doesn't do much for the people who live in Linden.
Yes, sir.
And so whether that's going to be addressed at some point, somewhere, either with an interlocal, I don't know, Tracy, or whatever. I mean, but I think I have an issue. I believe that, as Commissioner Keith, I think the board should try to balance out that Vander and Grace Creek are not really incorporated, but they ought to have some people from their area that sits on this joint planning board. Sure. They've got as much as anything else. But if we're going to allow these cities just to pick from wherever, I think it becomes a problem. So I think in terms of legal is where we address it at, whether it's in the bylaws or whether it's in the local agreement. But I think Commissioner Council, you had a
Yes,
comment?
because we as a board have allowed that to happen. And the flash is out here that the queen died.
Yeah, that's
what.
Yeah, the Queen died
Queen died.
in '96.
But
She named the Prime
that's
Minister
our
first,
fault,
though.
I think, as a board. And I don't know going forward
How to address that?
how to address it. But it's not fair is not right. And, I think we need to talk with,
Between Tracy, legal, and the planning, and the planning director.
if we need
to
to
come back
change
with
it some
something.
kind of way,
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
we need to fix that, because I've just noticed, it's like trying to scratch your foot through your shoes. I mean, it comes up all the time, but that's our fault. What kind of deadline do I want to put on this?
Well, I tell you what, they're going through the whole ordinance, so you can, I don't know if it needs to be addressed in that, or whether you want to bring it back sooner than that.
I can talk with Rick and Mr. Jackson, and we
Yeah,
can bring you
fix
something,
it,
see what
please.
options are
Fix it,
available.
please.
Okay.
Under, the other thing I had, under cooperation with interested private and public groups, you just let whoever the moderator just decide who comes and who doesn't come. I think maybe you want to at least have that committee have a vote on it or something as to, I mean, if you're gonna allow them just to bring who they wanna bring, because they left it clearly in the discretion of one person, where it talks about invite any interested party to appear before the committee. I think if they're on the committee ought to have some input as to that. That was under section 5, clause.
Okay.
And the other thing was, the last thing I had was under section 8, where they gave the director, let me see. I didn't see where there was anything, it says was authority approved or established by the board, but I didn't see anything that was approved or established by the board to be able to have that guideline under action by the staff. I didn't see that anywhere else in the bylaws, where that authority, where it was laid out. It makes reference to it, but I don't see where it's actually in there.
I'm sorry, I'm not following you. Can you
So
point to this?
under section 8, matters to be acted upon by the staff on behalf of the board, it says make action or make recommendations in the name of the board in accordance with authority approved or established by the board. But I didn't see anything established by the board.
Okay.
You make reference to something that doesn't exist, unless you can point to me where that exists.
Because they were all removed, they were redlined out.
Right. So, I mean, so there is no, I don't know how you make reference to something that doesn't exist.
Good question.
That's what
Again, yeah. So,
Happens all the time.
yeah, so I mean,
Makes it easier.
I can flag that for future bylaws update, if that would be adequate.
That's fine. Either one of those two things, that's fine.
Okay.
Just fix it.
So, with regard to those 2 or 3 things that I have, can I get a motion to place this on the consent agenda for the September 19th?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
And the second? Then move to second. All those in favor? Raise your hand, Jimmy. All right. Thank you, Rob.
Thank you.
All right. That takes us the intent to lease property at 5746 Kennel Road. We've done that in the past. That's the, Madam Manager, that's the,
We have a convenience site at this location, and we are asking for an increase in the lease amount from $4,000 to $5,000 for this lease term of 5 years. This is a very strategic location and very important for the citizens in that area.
so if I can get a motion to approve this? Oh,
Second.
one question.
Yeah, Amy, is this the area where they've had all those residential houses got built up around it lately?
Amanda, can you get the location? Is this in Linden?
There was one that we were there first. It's-
That was in Linden.
Just where it is.
I
That's all.
think you're talking about the Jernigan site.
That's
I
it.
get a lot of questions about the Jernigan site, and
All right.
it was sold during this last lease term, but we've talked with the new property owner who has intentions to continue the lease.
All right, that sounds,
On this one or the journey?
the journey.
Jernigan site.
Then
That's
bring
one
it
of the
back.
houses, right?
Yes.
The houses are complaining a whole bunch.
When we come back to the journey, because that's not on the
We'll
agenda.
come back with that with Lisa Miller.
We gonna talk about that on that.
And he wants it after December 1st. December 1st. Yes, motion approved.
All right, everybody, that's unanimous. Larry was Commissioner,
Or one of the two.
Lancaster.
one of the-
Yeah.
whoever did it.
Made the motion by Commissioner Council, a second by Commissioner Lancaster. You're welcome. Thank you. This takes us to intent to lease real property at 245 Person Street, and I think that's, Commissioner Keith sits on that board, and, Madam Manager.
Yes, sir. I'm going to turn this over to Mr. Jackson, who handles all the leases for the county.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. The Convention and Visitors Bureau currently resides at 245 Person Street. I think you're very familiar with that. They lease 7,049 square feet of that building, which is the entire square footage of that building. Their current lease is $10.50 per square foot per year for a term of 10 years. They have some responsibilities in this lease that are beyond what we typically ask of a lessee. So I do want to point that out. There is some differences in this lease and some of our other leases. And this is outlined in your agenda packet, but I'll go over it for your benefit. They are responsible for all other maintenance of the premises. There are some things we take care of, like the roof, the exterior walls, the parking lot, all landscaping. But the Convention Visitors Bureau is responsible for repair or replacement of all electrical system components, the lighting system, the plumbing system, heating, air conditioning, ventilation system, elevators, any other components or fixtures located in the building, regular maintenance of all interior surfaces like floors, doors, ceilings, walls, and windows. So we bring this to you today because it is time for this lease to expire November 30th. It will need to be renewed if they're going to stay in the building. And we're looking for guidance to see what your preference is in terms of the terms of the lease. Do you want to keep the lease like it is for the same rate and the same term, or do you want to change any of that? Or do you wish to not continue the lease? So those are things that...
So I guess and I'll go to Commissioner Keith, so what's the recommendation? From staff?
It would be simpler if we made this more consistent with our other leases and charged increased square footage rate and put the maintenance back on the county and maybe do a shorter term. That's an option. If you want to have them maintain
I said,
what
what's
they're
the
maintaining.
recommendation? Now you give me options.
Well, again, we're looking for guidance, and these are some things for you to consider.
Commissioner Keith.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm the reason they're paying $10, or there was $9 a square foot, because they were paying $3 before, which was very, very reasonable. They had a bunch of money, just a good amount of money. I think the lease is fine as it is with the maintenance. We have a bad habit of giving away property and renting other property, but this is my only concern. I don't want to go into a 10-year lease without the county having an out. And is there an out on there right now?
Well, it's a normal termination. You know, you give notice and...
Okay. You know, there's been talk for years about the future of the CBD and whether it might even be there or who might be going. We don't want to get caught in an area where we're renting to someone who's maybe not doing the same services for the county. So what I would say, we can still have a 10-year lease, but we have to have some sort of out for the county to be able to say, should the agreement terms change, whether or not the services that they provide to the county were affected, that we would have the ability to take over that building. There's a lot of things that are happening in downtown in the next couple of years. You don't know. 10 years is a long time. I remember Mr. Moorfield never wanting 10-year leases, but it seemed like that was a long lease. But at the same time, you can't have a month-to-month or a year lease. You know, you have to be reasonable, so, you know.
What you could, you know, I thought in terms of some of the climate that's over there, 10 years is a little long. You can do 5 with the option of either side, with the county to renew it at the end of 5 if you wanted to, if they needed a 10-year lease. But if they are no longer from TDA, the responsible party, and TDA says we're not doing that, then you've got an entity that's not really with the county that will take up a whole building, so.
They're a nonprofit by
Right, they're a nonprofit by themselves, so I would clearly not be looking in a 10-year lease. People do want some, at least some stability, so you might look at a 5-year lease, so that gives them some stability. But it also gives the county an opportunity to look at the landscape after that, if you're looking for direction.
I would, and agreed, but I would also like to caveat on there that if for some instance that came up, that the county had, if the relationship were to change,
Between the TDA and the
between the
CDD.
TDA, the CDD, the county, the CDD, whatever,
Can be
then it
reviewed.
can be renegotiated.
Or
So-
reviewed.
Okay, so to clarify, you would like some type of escape clause, a 5-year term, and then keep the rate the same. So,
I don't have a problem with that.
okay.
Madam
And-
Manager?
I agree.
So I'll incorporate that into the intent to lease.
She's gonna go do it and bring it back.
Yeah, so I'll incorporate that into the intent to lease, and then the request would be to include those items in the advertisement, because we have to advertise for 30 days before we do, the board does a resolution. So if that's okay, that would be the motion. Is that,
Well, I thought you were gonna go ahead and do all that and bring it back.
so this isn't a contract, this isn't, we
I
would
know.
bring the actual lease agreement to you at a future date. All we're asking for today is the definition of the terms, so that it can be advertised in the intent to
Okay.
lease.
So is, Jim, is that your motion to be able to do that?
That's my second.
And second by Commissioner Council? And Tracy will make sure that the clerk gets those items right in there, because she wants it in her minutes that we just did. All those in favor?
I'm not familiar with what we're talking about.
Voting in favor, Commissioners Lake, Castor, Council, Stewart, Adams, and Keith, in opposition.
I'm just not voting.
He abstained because he wasn't here to hear the presentation, he said. Which then goes to a unanimous vote. So, all right. So just walk out, and you're not here, and it'll be unanimous. Come back here. All right. We got it clear, Madam Clerk, so all right, thank you. That will take us to the amendment to the Cumberland County Personnel Ordinance. Madam Manager.
Yes, sir. I'm going to ask Mr. Brian Haney to put his HR hat on, and he's going to present this item. This is an item that he's been working with Assistant County Attorney Kevin McGuckin.
Well, it just makes sense. Did y'all see that? It just took out that they can't appeal a probationary or a temporary employee. If they dismiss, they don't get to appeal.
Say what?
Down at the bottom. A temporary or a probationary shall not have the right to submit a grievance or appeal the employee's dismissal. That's what it goes to. Your probationary. You went to.
If you're on probation, that makes sense.
But it was some other language that they took out, so it just stops right there. That was the end of it, right?
Correct. It would bring our personnel ordinance in line with the State Human Resources Act, as well as increase consistency within the ordinance and provide additional flexibility for departments to assess the performance of employees during that probationary period.
So if I can get a motion to amend the Cumberland County Personnel Ordinance and take it to the September 19, 2022 Board of Commissioners meeting.
So moved. Oh, second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Stewart, second by Commissioner Council. All those in favor? All righty. Yes.
Yes.
All right, this is the TDA resolution that we're not in the favor of, but go ahead.
That's why I voted against that issue. Because I think everybody should have an opportunity to explain.
It's not unanimous, it was on this untitled business.
That's okay.
It's unanimous. He just, Madam Manager, the TDA, that was unanimous, Madam Clerk.
Yep. Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir. I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. This is an item that was brought forward from the TDA after a recent board meeting. Mr. Moorfield, as legal consultant, along with Chris Carr to the TDA, developed a resolution for the board members asking the board to waive their rules on residency requirements, as well as specifically looking at owners instead of managers of hotels and motels. And I know that the county attorney has worked with Mr. McGuckin on this.
And I will tell you, for the board, I don't have a problem with, it doesn't have to be owning a hotel or motel, but I think if you're talking about Cumberland County tax dollars, you have to live in the county. I don't think I should have somebody outside the county dealing with taxpayers' money who live inside the county. So that part of it, I would not be in agreement with. The other part with the owners, I think that changes a little bit. Commissioner King.
Agreed. I've always had a problem with the term owner. Well, not a single hotel is owned by one person. It's owned by an LLC or a
That's right.
corporation.
That's right.
And it's what was always put in there to do it. But, you know, the reason it's in there, because if you look at the makeup of our board right now, even as Mr. Moorfield's not here, but you have a representative of hotels that are under 200 people, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a hotel owner. We could nominate you to represent hotels. You might know nothing about the business. The whole ordinance is a little squirrely, but the whole idea of the owner, I agree. You don't need to be an owner. I'm not even sure you need to be in the hotel business. Maybe in the tourism business.
And the last thing I had was, I don't think you get 3 successive terms. You get 2 terms like everybody else. They were trying to change it to 3 successive terms. So if you take those 2 things out and you can change that owner thing, I think then, if I can get a motion for that.
So moved.
Could you clarify the motion, please, or repeat the motion, please, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, the motion, well, I guess it would be, we'd have to do the resolution. We're going to take out the part about, you got to live in the county, first of all. That's one of the things. If we're taking, I guess it's not in the motion because you're taking that out because it's not in the resolution. So you're taking that out of the resolution, and you're taking out the resolution that you got to be an owner. And we're going to leave it at 2 successive terms. And that was Mr. Evans's motion. I get a second?
Yes.
It's been moved and second. All those in favor? All righty. And that will take us to our break. Is what we're going to do, because I know what they got up there. So we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back for the Board of Commissioners decision points for the comprehensive space needs analysis, because they got a bunch of things up there. So Brian, if we can just take a break. They heard you. also very much for that small break. And that will take us to where we are. H, the Board of Commission decision points for the comprehensive space needs analysis. Madam Manager.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As you may recall, we had a meeting with the Creech and Associates back in the month of June. And since that time, we have come back to the board and provided some decision points that would help us move forward in the short term. And so today we have with us Brent Green from Creech and Associates that's going to share those decision points about how the board might like to move forward. And so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Brent.
Thank you, Ms. Commissioner. Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, thank you for the window of time with you today. I'm looking forward to share an update on our progress. My name is Brent Green. I'm with Creech Associates. I'm a partner there. And our firm has enjoyed for about the past year working with your staff on understanding comprehensive needs for space and a solutions and facilities master plan that might address those. So again, I think one of the things we want to share with you is there was sort of an informal poll done to help us gain some direction on some consensus from the decision points that were just mentioned by Ms. Cannon. And then we're going to talk about the General Government Services site, the historic courthouse, and the JMB courthouse as those decision points that are really relevant to right now in our process. Okay? So you all, I believe, participated in an informal survey where 3 questions were posed to you. And this may or may not be your first opportunity of seeing the consensus of these, but I'll just sort of move through them. So the first question really surrounded the use of the historic courthouse, and it was really focused on should county administration, legal, the governing body, and the clerk all be housed in a new general government services building. So should everyone be together? And you can see there that there was consensus on the 4 to yes versus 2 no. So that was a yes answer for us. Okay. So the second point of questioning was, where would this new complex want to be? Should it be at the Crown Center complex, or should we be looking for another location otherwise? And I think there was the most consensus on that particular question, that we should be looking at locations other than the Crown Center site. And then that third question, which really talks about the building that we're in now, is that we know that there's needs for expansion here. So what are the 2 ways which we should look at expansion here? Should it be connected, an adjacent expansion connected to the exterior, or should we continue our thought process on going up a floor, which the structure for this building was originally intended for? And you can see there was a close proximity there, 3 to 2 for adding the floor here versus going out. Yes, sir.
Well, mine was an addition to the courthouse, so it's 3 to 3. What happened is when I answered it, you didn't have those 2. It was just the question didn't allow you to answer. And so when I went back to try to, after y'all changed it, it wouldn't let me go back in to change. So it was 3 to 3.
That's our strategy. No,
It was a strategy too. I saw that. But no, the original question didn't allow. You remember that?
Yes, sir.
In the email.
That's a great, thank you for clarifying that. And the reality of number 3 is that of the decision points for today, it's the least pressing. In other words, it's the one that's the least contingent on what our decisions are right now. But thank you for that. We'll make that change. So again, I think you can see down there, perhaps you can, in the gold text. So we sort of took the answers from these questions and we said, based on this feedback, this feedback that we received from you, we should be looking at a site to develop for a general government services complex that will be large enough to allow for future expansion, include locations for all of these administrative departments that are currently located in this facility and the historic courthouse. So that was the consensus that we gained from this exercise. You may or may not recall the last time that we were together, we talked about what a generic site might look like for this General Government Services Center, which we're also referred to as a campus. And you can see there are 3 buildings that are labeled A, B, and C that we have begun thinking about functionally and how those could be divided, and also use those buildings to create a feel, use those edges to define outdoor space in what might feel like a government center campus. So you can see one building would be to focus on development services, again, around a customer service-friendly approach to those type of functions needed from your citizens. We have one building that would be primarily a community building, so those are, those functions that you see there, the community room, the chamber, and all those type of facilities.
And then we have sort of a main administrative building, which is that building C right there on Axis, and you can see the functions there that are listed. So these are a combination of 2- and 4-story buildings. You see their relative square footages and the parking, surface parking that would be required to facilitate those. So we begin to use that as a map for the types of sites that we could look for that will be viable other than a Crown Center site for this type of complex. You can see here, based on that design point, I think this is information you have seen before, those 3 buildings, A, B, and C. A and B are both the same size at 38,000 square feet, as Building C is the largest administrative building, and you see their respective costs there. So that's a total construction cost, a total sub-cost there of $40 million, and then we add all of those other cost components that bring that up to a construction cost, including escalation, which is currently factored past, Q1 of 2024. You can see there's a 0 in what we're carrying past that line item. We are carrying 9% as that escalation. That is sort of market current right now based on the construction industry and the trends that we're seeing. So you see that total construction cost there of just over $59 million, and with some potential soft costs, which is an industry standard metric, you see that number at the bottom, the $77 million construction cost, total project cost. Okay. So that was the general services campus. Just to touch briefly on the other 2 components that we talked about, we've talked a great deal about the historic courthouse renovation. As you all are probably aware, we did a facility condition assessment of that. It generated about a 250-page document of all the things that will be needed to do in that facility to bring it up to current use and even potentially change its use. And you can sort of see there, we generated 2 cost estimates. One was for allowing it to continue as a business occupancy, which is not a change in use. The other was the concept of museum and how that might modify the use to an assembly occupancy, and that would require additional upgrades. But you can see really at this early phase, again, the decision for use on this building, on the historic courthouse, that could be made at a later time because we're building the new general services campus. That allows for those functions to have a home, and it really does defer your ability to make a decision on the future use of the historic courthouse. Okay. And then this building that we're in. And you can, as you'll recall, we talked about 2 different ways of approaching that, adding vertically, adding horizontally. Apparently there was a 3-3 tie on that particular discussion point. And what you can see from these numbers is they're $3 million apart, but this project is far enough out on your decision tree that really we can think about these numbers as similar. So again, as I mentioned earlier during that discussion, this is a decision point that can be made by future folks down the road. Because this won't come online until we've had an opportunity to build the other campus and move people out of this facility. Okay. So again, I think in terms of where we are in our overall process, that's a sort of distilled, high-level approach to where we are in terms of decision points and our next steps. We're asking you how you all would like for us to move forward with our planning for this new general government services campus. And then, of course, regardless of what's chosen for the other 2 facilities, as we've said repeatedly, this one kind of has to be the first step as the way we phase the projects. So thank you for the opportunity to share. And I'll pause here for comments.
Can you go back to the slides of the general services complex?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that's just a generic location right now. And what is the acreage on that?
The acreage on that is around 35. And of course, as we consider opportunities for future expansion, we would think larger than that relative to potential sites.
Okay, none of your estimates included land acquisition?
No, sir, that was left as a 0 line item pending that decision point. Yes, sir.
Now, the assembly areas, I was thinking we could use other funding for ARP, but this is new construction and you couldn't. Okay. I'm a little surprised that the historic courthouse came in so high. I mean, what was the major cost with that renovation?
Unfortunately, there's no silver, and I don't have that
that detail with me today, I'd be happy to share that with you, but it was really just, it was the idea of life safety, it was the idea of structural concerns. There's a few dead-end corridors and things like that that the building would have to comply with in order to be brought into a more current use, mechanical systems. It was, I don't know that there was any one overriding item, it was just sort of the overall conditions of the building.
Where would the commissioner's chambers be in the complex? Would it be in the A or the C?
That's a great question. I mean, the idea is, well, I mean, I think B would be the community building, so in terms of where the chamber would reside, if you said we wanted to be in that building, that's the most public building, I think that would be a location that would make sense. We could also make sense out of Building C as sort of the main services building. I think of the three, A would be the least likely choice just because of its focus on the development services aspect of your operation.
Thank you.
So I guess, just in general, does that take, and this is just be a detailed question, I guess, the register of deeds out of this building, or does it leave it here because it's more generally with, whether it needs to be with the tax or whether it needs to be with the clerk because of, I don't know. But most of that's online anyway, so.
So, because of the limitations of space in this facility, this plan
Would
includes.
include him.
Yes, sir. And the Register of Deeds agreed with that.
Okay, I was just kind of wondering.
And Mr. Chair, since the Crown Coliseum site obviously was not selected, and we're looking at the desires to find a new site, I think one of the questions you have to ask is, does that site need to be downtown? I mean, we're talking about 35 acres, and there's no land acquisition cost associated with this. So it's a desire of the rest of the board that we remain in the downtown location.
I think so. At least for my, and everybody else for themselves, just in terms of where, I guess, this community has been able to come from the east and the west, right downtown. I just think downtown is your hub. Most of your municipal buildings, I mean, are downtown. It adds to, huh? Yes. I don't know how to ask you. I'm
Downtown like a natural idea.
See, the thing you didn't know is when I was talking to him, I got a room up here. I still got one here. Commissioner Booth and I'm still here.
Downtown seems to be the most appropriate place for it, but I don't know what the consideration is to.
Well, and I would tell you, in terms of the businesses downtown, a lot of it comes out of this out of our buildings and everything. And to bring people down, it just makes it a hub and creates activity, at least during the day.
So how much availability is there of 35 acres in the downtown area?
Great question. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay, Mr. Keith.
I'm sorry. That was just.
Okay. Go right ahead.
I was just going to say that dialogue is actually part of what we discussed, during our, and thinking about a site of that size, but it's in proximity to downtown. I will also offset that by saying services in this building remain, so that foot traffic that you're used to that supports the businesses in the downtown, this facility would remain here regardless, of this operation. So, thank you.
Anybody have any questions or comments?
I was just listening to him talking about the food services downtown, utilize the other businesses that's downtown. How much foot traffic do you have from the courthouse going downtown?
Well, ask the turkey shop, they'll tell you. They don't make any more turkeys though, they're not doing turkeys anymore, the turkey shop.
So you're talking about the individuals that use the courthouse or
them
the
too.
employees? Oh, you say them too.
Yeah, I mean, you get the employees here, you get the jurors that come in, and I think when people come here, if you come especially from way out the west, my office is on Hay Street. Everybody drives down Hay Street. I can tell you, everybody, when they come downtown, and I watch you when you leave, so I know exactly when you leave, but it does, all of that traffic. And out of here, Mr. Keith was always talking about the deli downstairs, the hot dogs are good, but people walk up to the turkey shop and own up to some of those other businesses.
I didn't realize that there was traffic there.
Just because you just drive in and drive out.
Come to the downtown on the courthouse.
Yes, sir.
We good?
Yes, sir. The local businesses do appreciate that support.
Yeah.
Okay, that's all that I have
All right.
prepared for you all this afternoon.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And, thank you. All right, so that will take us to the closed session item, which is the real property acquisition and attorney-client privilege. So pursuant to NCGS 143-318-11A5 and 143-318-11A3, if I can get a motion, Commissioner Council has a motion, second by Commissioner Stewart. We will, all of those in favor? We're going to closed session. And we're back. If I can get a motion to come out of closed session?
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and second. All those in favor? And then if I can get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and second. All those in favor? I got y'all out of here before 4 o'clock.